navigating the complexities in transitioning from the Medical Devices Directive to the Medical Devices Regulation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be discussing the complexities in transitioning between the directives to the regulations. All right. As a way of introduction, the directives number 3 were put out in 1990, 1993, 1998. So now they're 30 years plus old, and they had a number of issues, which resulted in a number of scandals and a number of lack of harmonization across member states. So this put the need for a new legislative framework, which are the regulations. The regulations came out in May 26, 2017, and they were published in the official journal of the European Commission. And transition periods that we will be discussing were put in place directly into legislation. The initial transition period for the MDR was from 2017 to 2020. As a result of COVID, an amending legislation was pushed forward to push the date to 2021. So that was the first transition that was put in place. Unfortunately, there have been a number of bottlenecks, be it notified bodies, be it medical device shortages, be it COVID, the pandemic, and transitions have been extended now to December 2028, depending on the risk class of the device. So why the change? The change was there to address gaps in the medical device directive, as I mentioned before. And there was a lack of harmonization between member states. Some member states had very high standards, some member states had the bare minimum standard, and this created a gap between member states. Obviously, as we know, medical devices is a fast-moving technology hub where advancements happen on a day-to-day basis. So the regulations were needed to catch up, to make the legislative framework more adapted to the needs of today. And obviously the change was done at the core of it to enhance patient safety. So what are the key differences? The majority of the scandals, the majority of the problems that were in the directives were due to a lack of post-market surveillance, breast implants, metal and metal hip implants, gynecological meshes. All of these obtained their CE mark, but as time progressed, they were not followed up in a post-market surveillance setting. So scandals, unfortunately, a lot of issues were recognized quite late, and so a number of incidents was very high. So now the MDR focused heavily on this and created a much more robust post-market surveillance system. This includes stricter clinical evaluation, greater need for technical documentation in the dossier, more reporting requirements where the definition of the incident report of serious incidents was expanded to include a lot more. And in actuality, the scope itself was enlarged and was made wider to include reprocessed devices, aesthetic devices, and also software, as we've been mentioning throughout this conference, and also artificial intelligence and that kind of concept. So what are the main challenges that stakeholders are facing? As we mentioned, again, once more, increased obligations. The regulations are very much focused on the manufacturer, on the stakeholder that builds the medical device, that obtains their CE mark, so notified bodies as well that issue CE mark are a mainstay of the regulation. This is done so that the device is built to a high standard, to a very high quality from the get-go, instead of just ensuring that the device in post-market surveillance is continuing to perform, the risk-benefit ratio is continuously reassessed. We ensure that the device is built with quality from the get-go. And there has been a reclassification of devices. Both the MDR and the IVDR have seen a change in the rule system, the IVDR being much more robust, and where we've seen up classification of devices. When I say reclassification, realistically, very few, if at all, devices were classified downwards in terms of risk. So many devices were upscaled in terms of risk classification from a class 1 self-certified device, low risk, to a class 2A, class 2B, medium high risk devices. IVDR implemented a new risk classification system, ABCD, from low to high risk, where under the directives most devices were considered low risk, so they were self-certified. Now under the new IVDR, devices 70–80% of devices require a notified body, so reclassification has much more. Obviously, this is documentation practice has been updated, quality management system upgrades are required, and limited notified bodies was one of the first bottlenecks that was encountered with the MDR. So now we've gone over the how, the why, and the what of the regulation overchange from the directive to the regulation. So what are the strategies to overcome these challenges? First and foremost, the most easy and basic core principle to do is to conduct a comprehensive gap analysis. A good gap analysis will tell you where your documentation practice is lacking, where you need to work to focus on to achieve the standard that the MDR now requires. That being said, a lot of companies have very big gaps due to the nature of the MDR itself. So it is not feasible for these processes to be implemented within 1 week's time, within a month's time, 2 months' time. So we have to make sure that these processes are implemented in a gradual manner over a period of time to ensure flow and consistency throughout. Obviously, investment in staff training and development, this comes in 2 aspects. First and foremost, the standards have increased expertise. What was considered an expert under the directives may not necessarily be considered an expert under the regulations. So training and development is ongoing and needs to be done anew. Recertification has to be done for all devices, the same for notified bodies, so training and development has to be done anew. And finally, we need to leverage digital tools for documentation. Throughout the process of the stakeholder needs to implement digital tools. So here are a couple of case studies. Organization A, for example, had an issue with documentation overhaul, where they failed to meet the QMS documentation that standards that the MDR is requiring now. So what was the solution? The solution was to create an interpersonal team dedicated specifically to documentation, to the UMS overhaul. They implemented audits, sequential audits at a regular basis to ensure documentation is implemented in a methodological manner. Organization B is in relation to notified bodies. As I said, notified bodies was a big bottleneck. So what did the organization B do? Obviously, early engagement is not something that you need to think about. The earlier you engage with the notified body, the easier, the faster you get your product to market. Timelines with notified bodies take 12, 18, 24 months from initial contact to getting your product certified. Early engagement with notified bodies is crucial to both from a stakeholder perspective and both from a patient perspective, which, if this is not done in a timely manner, will eventually result in medical device shortages. Organization C is, again, similar to where we had an issue with quality management, but this was tackled in a different solution in terms of digital tools. A digital system was created where everything was digitized in terms of incident reporting, in terms of documentation control, QMS management, and so forth. So this helped to shorten timelines to make the process leaner as much as possible. What are the implications for the industry? So the medical device regulations is at the center, and we have to note that this is a cyclical, implications are cyclical. So what affects the manufacturer will eventually affect the patient, and the patient in return affects the rest of the signal. So manufacturers have increased accountability, as you said. They have now more needs for continuous market surveillance. Distributors have obligations for verification, have now more reporting responsibilities. Healthcare professionals have now, under the new system with a digital platform, better access to the safety data of devices, which in turn allows the patient to have improved safety standards and better access to devices. And what are the conclusions? So first and foremost, we need to prioritize safety for the patient. That is the core scope of the MDR. We need to understand the new requirements. It's not easy to list the new requirements, but to understand is a different concept. We have to go through, we have to work through the different requirements in a methodological manner. We have to plan strategically and act proactively. And finally, you have to, again, learning adaptability is a continuous process that occurs not in 1 to 2 days, but in terms of months, years, and so forth. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you very much. If you wish to contact me, here's my email, and let me know.